So let me bring up the next speaker. I got to be honest with you guys, and no offense to all the other speakers. I love you from the bottom of my heart. You're all great. Blah, blah, blah. I am most excited for this one, and the reason is because I've had a man crush on Kirby for about 5 years. You can look at him like he's just like, the jawline, my God. He, unfortunately, is also from West Point. I told you that I am cursed by being surrounded by Army people. He is as well. I'm not even going to go into all of the ways that we met and all that other stuff. At the social hour, we're almost done here, by the way. At the social hour, we can talk all day long about this stuff. The reason Kirby's here today is because, number one, obviously he acts with just the highest integrity. I've got great stories about that. Things that he did not have to do to keep in with integrity that I know almost no one else would have done. And we can talk about that. But he's somebody that operates that way. But he also has a niche investing strategy that I honestly believe is the most powerful cash flow investing strategy in America today. And I will back that up with ROI numbers. I'm not going to spoil the fun for him because I want him to talk to you about it, and I'm setting the bar high. So if you flop, it's on you, bro. Nevertheless, Kirby, I'm just going to give you the stage, bro. He's one of my dear friends. I love him to death. He's like a brother. Put your hands together for Kirby Atwell.
Thank you, buddy. That was actually a lot of sentences for a Marine Corps officer to put together. So really, really proud of you. Let's go ahead and dive right in. So short-term rentals are dead. Airbnb is dead. Occupancy is way too high. Way too low. Competition's way too high. Price points and interest rates are off the charts. And you can't cash flow today with short-term rentals. Has anyone heard any of these statements recently? Yeah? Has anyone thought any of these statements recently themselves? Yeah. And I fully agree with every single statement on here. And I know that probably sounds kind of weird, right? Because I'm supposed to be the short-term rental guy up here telling you how great short-term rentals are, and I'm telling you how they don't work. So let me just clarify. I agree with every one of these statements on here for the vast majority of deals out there today. But over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to explain to you a niche within a niche, like Buddy talked about, that makes every single one of these statements totally untrue. And this has totally changed my life. It's changed my family's financial future. And so what if you could create $9,294 a month of net cash flow? That's after all your expenses, all your set-asides for maintenance, your mortgage, everything, with just 3 short-term rental deals. And I know that sounds probably oddly specific, that number, but that's because it is specific. It comes from 3 deals that we just did over this past year, right? So I did one of them, and then 2 members of the White Feather community that I worked with to implement this strategy did the other 2. So I'm going to share these with you, and all you have to do is just replicate these 3 deals, or do 3 deals similar to this, and I'm going to show you how, and you can have this exact same result. So I wish that I could say that I just figured this strategy out and it just came to me and I, had wealth really quickly, but that's not the case. It's been a long journey to get here. I started out just like many of you. I served in the military, and Buddy said I went to West Point. What he should have said is I barely got into West Point, and then he should have clarified it further that I barely got out of West Point, but I did in 2005, and I was commissioned as an officer. And I served 6 years as an officer. And while I was in, I picked up what I call the gateway drug into real estate, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I read that book, and I got hooked, just like many of you, right? You read that book. And so I knew when I got out in 2011, I wanted to get into real estate. But unfortunately, the Financial Freedom Summit did not exist back then, which would have been perfect for me getting out just to explain how to get to financial freedom. Instead, I had to try to just figure out a strategy. And so I got out in 2011, and I started a flipping company, because that just seemed like the way to make a whole bunch of money. You buy something super cheap, you throw some money into it, you sell it really expensive, and everyone's getting rich, right? So that's what I did. I partnered with 2 friends, and we started flipping properties. And we flipped about 70 houses around the Chicagoland area over the next 5 years. And we were kind of recognized as having success. But after 5 years, I realized I was in the exact same position financially as when I had started 5 years previous. And we had made a lot of money. But with a flipping company, the money comes in and then it goes back into marketing and staff and then, getting these properties under contract and all the things that can go wrong during the rehab process. And then it sits on the market. So it was a real grind. And I realized that I was going to be doing this for the rest of my life. And so I had this sort of come to Jesus epiphany at this point that I'm going to share with you. And this epiphany really changed my life. It changed my financial future and got us to a place of financial freedom about 4 years ago to where my wife and I don't have to work and we have financial freedom. And that's this, that focusing on growing your wealth or growing equity prior to growing your cash flow is what's keeping you stuck in the rat race. So let me just say that again. Focusing on your time and your money and your effort on growing your wealth and equity prior to growing cash flow is what's keeping you stuck in the rat race. And this is what 95% of people do, because this is what we've been taught, right? You work a W-2 job, typically, and then anything that's left over after you pay your bills, you invest in a 401k, in stocks, in crypto, and all these investments that you are paying for today, and you're hoping long-term they're going to go up in value, right? That's what we do. But in the meantime, they're not paying you. They're not giving you income that you can live off of, right? And so it's very difficult to get to financial freedom that way. But instead, what you could do is you could take a couple of years, implement the strategy I'm going to share with you today, focus on high cash flowing assets, and then at that point, as soon as you've crossed the threshold of paying your personal expenses, you've literally just freed up tens of thousands of hours the rest of your life that you no longer owe to somebody else, right? Because your bills are paid for. So think about the wealth building that you can do then, the equity that you can do then, because you have all that time, or you can spend it however you want. If you just live off the cash flow then, the continuing cash flow. But most people do it the other way. They focus on wealth. Well, this will go up in value over time. Oops, let me go back. So, realizing this, we decided to start buying long-term rentals. So I decided, I'm not going to flip anymore. I'm going to buy long-term rentals. So we bought about 26 long-term rentals around the Chicagoland area, built up a portfolio. And cash flow, I started to realize cash flow is great, but it was going to take a really long time because a good rental property, typically it kicks off a few $100 a month, right? So it's going to take a long time to get to a place of financial freedom. And so also at this time, my wife and I got married. This was around 2016, and we started doing something together that I think is a step that most people skip, and it's so important, and I can't emphasize this enough, but we started talking about what financial freedom meant to us. What does our lifestyle by design look like? And this is what a lot of people don't do. Up until this point, I was chasing the shiny objects that people told me was success, right? And so then we sat down together and we started asking, what is the game we're actually playing? Does this stuff that other people say is success even matter to us? And it didn't. So we started mapping out our ideal lifestyle. And we wanted to live on a farm. And so we wanted to grow our food and have animals, and we wanted to spend a lot of time with the family that we didn't have yet. We didn't have kids, but we wanted to have kids and start spending time with, and be able to spend time with them and incorporate them into the business. We didn't want to come home at 7 o'clock at night and see our kids for an hour, and that was our parenting time, We wanted to do things different. And we wanted to make a big impact on other people and share, how we do things. And so, once you get super clear on what that looks like for you, on what your version of financial freedom looks like, it's incredible how the strategy presents itself. And that's exactly what happened for us. So I think the best way to share with you the strategy that led us to our ideal lifestyle is to share with you actual examples. So this is the first example here, and this is the address of this property. You can look it up, and you can see that I'm not lying about this. But this is a property that we bought just almost exactly a year ago. And this is in Michigan City where we invest. And the greatest part about this property is that not only was it less than $100,000, so, for you people from California, I know we're talking about these $1 million numbers, properties less than $100,000 do exist. I know it seems like a different planet, but they do. And the great thing about this property is it came with the house in front, which was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, and a studio apartment in the back, an ADU. And so I want to just share with you what the financials look like on this and why this is so impactful. So these are the 2 units. This is a picture of the living room in one of them. This is a picture of the studio apartment in the back. So we bought them for $94,900, and we put about $115,000 into it. So we're all in for just over $208,000, or just over $200,000. And the front house rents, on average, $195 a night, and the studio $125 a night, right? Between the high season and low season. And of course, they're not going to rent out 100% of the time. So we maintain about a 61% occupancy. So almost half the year, both units could sit vacant, and we'd still make $71,000 or $73,000 on this property, or $6,100 on a monthly basis. Now, when you look at the expense side of the equation, this is what a lot of people don't talk about, especially when they start getting into the $1 million numbers. When you buy properties this cheap, the expense side of the equation looks really nice because your mortgage is cheap, your taxes are super cheap, especially in Indiana. Your insurance is cheap. All your expenses are super cheap. So this property leaves us every single month with $3,400 that we can stick in our pockets. That's the net cash flow recurring on a monthly basis. So why is this type of property so much more financially impactful than your traditional short-term rentals? When I say the term Airbnb or short-term rental or vacation rental, this is typically the type of property that most people think of, right? The single-family property in a high-end vacation rental area, and this is like the traditional short-term rental. And these are okay. I'm not bashing these. I think there's a place for them, but there's some challenges, right? And if your goal is financial freedom, I'd argue that there's a better way to get there. So these are typically in higher cost areas. There's one income stream coming in. You've got the highest competition, and I'll share a little bit in a second about the difference between the competition in some of the high-end markets and some of the more affordable markets. There's no backup option, right? They change regulation. What are you going to do? You're going to sell it when everyone else is selling it? You're going to rent it as a long-term rental and hemorrhage thousands of dollars a month? So, Bobby talked about high risk and short-term rentals. I agree. And then there's just low cash flow because these are all $1 million plus properties. And you compare those to these. These are 4 properties that people who I've worked with over the last few years have purchased. And they're all multifamily properties, relatively low-cost areas, but still pretty decent nightly rate and occupancy. So the difference is these still command a decent nightly rate and occupancy because there's some local draws there, but yet they're in relatively affordable areas. So that creates really nice cash flow. And that's typically in areas just outside of cities or more mainstream short-term rental markets, right? So if you buy a property in the city for $800,000, you might be able to find that 30 minutes outside of the city, that same property for $200,000. But the nightly rate and occupancy might drop 20%, right? So you've got really great income. They also cash flow as long-term rentals. So as a backup plan, you're still cash flowing. That's a pretty good backup plan. And then they meet this 1% net rule. So if you've zoned out up until this point, this is something you probably want to pay attention to. The 1% net rule is a rule I kind of came up with based off of, most people know the 1% rule for buying long-term rentals, right? Have you heard of the 1% rule? So it states that if you buy a property for $200,000, then the gross rent should be about $2,000 a month coming in. And the thought process is once you subtract out your expenses, you're left with a few $100, and that's considered a good long-term rental. The problem is I don't care what the gross rent is because I can't pay my bills. I can't go to the grocery store and pay for my groceries with gross rent, right? So I want to know what the net is because if you make $1 million a year on a property, but you spend 1.1, that's a pretty terrible deal. So I created this 1% net rule that if you follow it, you're going to be in a really good position financially. So if you buy a property for $200,000, then after you subtract out all your expenses, including your mortgage and all your set-asides for maintenance, everything, there should be $2,000 left over at the end of the month, right? And that's the money you can take to the bank. That's the money you can live off of. And that's really the only money that matters if the goal is financial freedom, because that's what you're living on. So where can you buy these types of properties? This is the part of the country that I typically refer to as on sale, because if you look at the price per square foot there compared to the coasts out here, it's a vastly different situation. And so there's probably 100 different large population centers on this map in this box, and so just outside of those areas. And you can use tools like AirDNA. So AirDNA is a tool you can go to online, and it will tell you in any town what's the average occupancy rate and average nightly rate, right? So you start there, and you can start to see, okay, where's the income highest compared to the average purchase price? So if you go to city data, you can see the average purchase price, you can see demographics, you can see crime rate, you can see population growth or decline over time, all the information that you would want to evaluate a market. And then finally, go directly to the source, and you can look at Airbnb, the comps on Airbnb. You can put in the address of the property that you're interested in, and it will show you all the other properties around it and how they're actually performing. And that's exactly what Lucas did. So Lucas is a member of the White Feather community. He's not here today, but I started working with Lucas about 8 months ago. He's an Air Force grad. He's from California. And he followed this system, and he found 2 amazing deals. This is the first one. And I can pretty much guarantee that 90% of this room has never heard of Sault Ste. Marie. Has anyone heard of Sault Ste. Marie? All right. I'm about right. 90% hasn't. So it's not Sault Ste. Marie. That's what I thought it was when he brought it to me, because I'm from the Midwest, and I had never heard of this. But it's a little border town all the way up, right on the Canadian border. And it's probably the last place most people in here would say, that's a great short-term rental area, right? But what Lucas did is he followed this system, and he went to Airbnb, or AirDNA, and he saw it's actually got a 56% occupancy and a $200 average nightly rate. And then when he looked at the average purchase price, he saw it's $160,000. And so that's a pretty decent income compared to the average purchase price. So then he went to Airbnb, and he put the address in Airbnb, and you can see the little black dot that pops up when you put the address in and all the other properties around it. And what Airbnb does is it tells you these are the guest favorite properties. So these are like our highest recommended properties, the top 10, 15 in the area. And there's probably like 200, 300 properties in the area, but these are like the best, right? And remember I mentioned competition earlier in high-end markets compared to these markets? Look at like number 1 here. That's the competition that you're up against. Like it's a dark picture. It's like a 1980s quilt on a dark-colored couch. That's number 1. This one's like an indoor-outdoor picture. Like the competition isn't super high in these markets, right? But yet he's got 125 bookings, 4.89, 135, 4.96, 50. Like these are getting booked up because it's a border town. There's a lot of people traveling through there. There's a lot of infrastructure being built. So there is demand in this market, but yet the competition is low. So it's not a big stretch of the imagination to think if you were intentional about creating your listing, you could probably dominate in Sault Ste. Marie. So that's exactly what he did. He bought a 2-unit property, again, multiple units, and this is his numbers. He paid $141,000. This is right at the end of last year. So in November, I think he closed on this. It's still not set up yet. He's in the process of putting in $46,000. He'll be all in for $208,800 is his estimate. And these are very conservative estimates. And here's his income numbers and his expenses. It looks very similar to the one I just showed you in Michigan City that I did. So after his expenses, he's left with $2,424, almost $2,500 of monthly cash flow. So again, I talked about the 1% net rule, right? So he's all in for $208,000, and he's got $2,500. So it's above 1% net on an extremely inexpensive property.
Can I ask you a question? is this all cash or did he use a loan?
This is 100% financing, actually. So he used a DSCR loan, which I'm going to show how it happens, but he used a DSCR loan, and then he got a private loan for the down payment.
Okay, so he didn't use any of his own money.
None of his own. So it's infinite cash-on-cash return, actually,
Yeah.
and he's making $24 on a monthly basis after he's all done. Yeah. So this is the coolest part about, and it goes with what Buddy was just saying. This is, when I got out in 2011, got out of the Army, I wanted to buy cash-flowing assets, right? That's what attracted me to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But financing for 1 to 4 units, 30-year fixed rate financing it wasn't a thing at the time. Like, you could get conventional loans based on your W-2 income, but they didn't have really good investment options for a 1 to 4 unit. So that's why I got into flipping. But now they've got these things called DSCR loans, or asset-based loans. And I'm just going to share with you some of the details of these, or the kind of the rules of thumb. So you don't need a W-2 job to get these. Like, over the last 4 years, I haven't had a W-2 job. We've done tons of these. Typically, it's about a 20% down payment. Rates are slightly above conventional. So like, if you're getting like a 6% conventional loan on your primary, you might have a 7.5% on DSCR loans. They're 30-year fixed rate loans. And again, they're qualified based on the income from the property. So if you're following this 1% net rule, you're going to have plenty of income. You're going to be very attractive to a DSCR investor because the property itself is paying back the loan. And the objection that a lot of people will say now, as they're sitting there, go, okay, well, I don't have 20% down payments. Or I've got it for one, but I don't have it for multiple properties. Here's the thing. Every single person runs out of down payments. If you're going to scale a portfolio, nobody has unlimited money. Buddy doesn't have unlimited money, even though he seems like it. Everyone's going to run out of down payments at some point, whether it's your first deal, your 8th deal, whatever it is. So at that point, you can go to a private lender and say, look at the cash flow on this deal. We just put together like a one-pager saying, here's the deal, here's the address, here's what it's going to bring in based on the comparable properties, and you can have a second loan on this a second loan on this property and cover the down payment, and sometimes even the furnishing costs. And so then you have $0 out of pocket, and because you're buying such a high cash flowing property, you're still making several $1,000s a month in most cases. So it's a great option. So Andrew is a perfect example of a type of deal that every single person in this room should be doing. This is just, it's an awesome deal. So I started working with Andrew about 1.5 years ago. He's a member of the White Feather community, living in Opelika, just outside of Auburn, right? Auburn University in Alabama. And he wanted to combine what Patton was talking about earlier, using his VA loan with this strategy. And if you combine these two together, it is crazy powerful. So he bought this property, and he wrote this in our group, our closed group. He said, just close on this duplex in Auburn. We're going to use it. We used a VA loan on it, and I came out of pocket $1,000 to buy this property. Excited to do the real work, have you guys audit my listing. Huge shout out to Kirby and this group for giving me the knowledge to pursue financial freedom. So he bought it for $348. He used 100% VA financing and came out of pocket $1,000. So most people could come up with $1,000 to buy a property like this. And here's the greatest thing. So obviously, as a VA purchase, he has to live in one side. That's part of the rules, is you have to live in the property yourself for at least a year. So he moved in the property for a year, and this is the income from the other side, rented as a short-term rental. On average, about $175 a night, 65% occupancy is making $3,500. After a year, he can move out, right? And so then his income goes to $7,100. But the greatest part about this is his expenses don't change. So whether he's living there himself or he moves out and is making twice as much, his expenses are the same. So he has the option, should I live here for free in this house, or should I make $3,500 per month, then do exactly what most people have talked about today, is just go do it again and again. And you do this a few times, and you're in a very good position financially. That's without buying an investment property. That's just doing it on your personal residence. So are all these true? Yes, 100%. I agree with every single one of these if you're buying the traditional short-term rentals. And everybody clumps all short-term rentals in the same bucket, but I'd argue that there's another niche within that niche, right? And I just shared with you 3 specific examples of people who are in this community who are doing deals just like this, and it created almost $10,000 a month. So if you think about it, most people are probably at financial freedom or close to it with an extra $10,000 a month. So I work with people, a lot of people in the white feather community, a lot of other veterans as well, to walk them through this whole process. Very step by step, all the way through finding the right market, the right type of property, how to finance it. So if you're interested in that, I'd be happy to have a conversation. There's a pretty big discount for people who are part of this community. So thank you. I'm happy to answer questions too.
Hey, what did I tell you guys? One, it's impossible not to like this guy. He's so genuine, and like just the way that he presents stuff, it's like, oh wow. It's like he's, that you say these powerful things, like these ridiculous, by the way, your average cash on cash return that you look for in like a long-term rental, whatever, you're looking, 5 years ago it was like, let's try to get 9, 10, 11%. Now 6, 7%, something is what you're kind of rocking, right? That's pretty good. You get a 10% cash on cash return deal, yes.
Yeah.
His average deals are like 60. And I'm not talking about, right, you saw specific examples, and he cherry-picked 3 people in the white feather community just to show me that it's completely possible with the people that we work with. So unbelievable. So at the very least, have a conversation. How long are you staying here tonight?
Yeah.
Okay, so he'll be around.
Right,
we're going to have,
absolutely.
Guys, we've got about an hour left, and then we're going to go to the social, right? And so we got some really cool stuff we're going to do right here toward the end, but give a massive round of applause for Kirby. Thank you, brother.